My name is Sarah Pritchard. I'm a consultant social worker and trainer, and I work for Barnardo's in Tees Valley. At our Barnardo's, if you don't know service, we work with children who have been sexually abused, children who are displaying, engaging in harmful sexual behaviour, and children who are exploited. So with all of that kind of links, I have the honour today of being the chair of this conference. So what my role is to navigate us through the agenda, but it's also to monitor the chat as I've been doing. So please keep those questions and reflections coming, and I will be able to pose those to our speakers as we go through. So just to get on with a bit of housekeeping. So please use the chat as I've mentioned, but we know our confidentiality, but no identifying information of any children and families that you're working with, because there are so many people in here and we need to keep everybody safe. If you don't mind, we've got a lot to get through, so be really prompt after the breaks. We can't wait to check if everybody's back, because there's a lot of us, which is amazing. So just those 10 minutes, if you can come back. There is a trigger warning to today because of what we're speaking about, and within the training and conferences that I do, the lived experience approach is so important. So we have a lot of lived experience speakers. Some of this may be triggering for you or just uncomfortable to hear, so please keep yourself safe and take any support that you need. Me and Martin will be hanging around at the end should you need it, but please reach out to your networks as well. Throughout the conference today, we've tried to build in a real golden thread, and that golden thread is relationship practice. You are doing so much in Darling to make sure that relationships and relational practice is really key to all of the work that you're doing. So I want you to, as you're thinking today and hearing, think and reflect on what are your relational skills. What do you think is really important that you can offer? It's a privilege that we work with our children and families. You know, we should be really, sometimes may not feel like that, but it is. We're involved in their lives. What are you offering them within the relationships that you have to help them move forward in their lives? One of my favourite quotes that I say a lot in the work that I do is by Dr. Karen Treisman. Relational trauma requires relational repair, and that's where we need to start from this morning. So I will now park my seat and hand over to the wonderful Chris Bell, who is going to open the conference and talk about what does harm outside the home mean to Darlington and why contextual safeguarding is so important for Darlington. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Sarah. I have had a few technical issues this morning, so if I do lose kind of sound or anything, I'll hopefully pick it back up again shortly. But thanks for that opening. You've stolen my thunder a little bit with some of the things you and Alison at the start, but firstly, thanks everyone for taking the time this morning. I think we know as we go through COVID recovery that our time is even more precious than it probably was before. So finding even just half a day out of the day jobs can be a real challenge. So just a huge thank you to everyone. I never ceases to amaze me really how everyone sort of pulls together in Darlington, and I think to have the numbers that we've got on the call, and I did have a quick scan at the intros at the start, and it's clear that we're represented from all different agencies and all different corners of the town really. So just really impressed with the numbers that we've been able to get to join this morning, and thanks again for your time. As Sarah touched upon, the conference today is all around that area, and we've kind of got as the title contextual safeguarding / harm away from home, which really is in a sense the same thing. As Sarah said, in Darlington we're terming this harm away from home, but I think the kind of official contextual safeguarding definition which exists still really covers what we're looking at. So when we talk about contextualised safeguarding or harm away from home, we're talking about a specific approach to understanding and responding to young people's experiences of significant harm beyond their families. I'm not going to go into great detail around it because we've got some excellent speakers lined up who are incredibly more knowledgeable and well versed around this than I am, but I just wanted to set that context that really that's what we're talking about, and we really felt as a service that harm away from home really kind of captures what we mean from that. It's a really fast developing area in social work, in children's services. We know that it challenges us. It's different to what we know, but to echo what Sarah said earlier, this is about building relationships. It's the same as any other aspect of social work or early help work or pastoral support or any interventions. This is about working with young people, working with their families to understand what their strengths are, what the challenges are, and essentially to work with to support them through that. And really that the harm away from home in terms of how we should respond is it's a different perspective, but it shouldn't be a different approach. So I think what we want to talk about quite a lot is that in Darlington, our way of really embracing this quite fast developing area of safeguarding, it's not about a new tool that we're going to give. It's not about changing all of our assessment frameworks to be doing something different. Really what we want to give you today is to challenge your thinking, to hopefully expand that thinking a little bit, and it is really that thinking about safeguarding away from the home, and that children can be at risk, or young people can be at risk of significant harm, even if there is no harm or risk within the home. I think our quite traditional view around safeguarding can very much be that we evidence and look for evidence where harm or risk is coming from parents or from carers. And in many situations, when we're talking about harm away from home, it's quite the opposite. We very much need to see parents as a safeguarding partner, really, as a partner that sits around that table in terms of coming up with those solutions. Again, I would hope that we would be doing that in our relationship-based work with families anyway. But I suppose when we're approaching families and it's felt that harm is from within the home or from within the relationship dynamics within the family, the approach is inevitably going to be somewhat different to when we're talking about things outside. So hopefully the speakers and presenters that we have lined up will help put some flesh on the bones around all of that. Like I say, it's not about, I don't want anyone to think they're going to come away from here and that we've got a brand newly designed template or anything like that. For me, this session isn't around that. It's not around us needing to do things differently, as it were. It's using those same core skills that you all have in terms of engaging and working with young people and with families. But hopefully this session will allow kind of an expansion, really, broaden your thoughts really around how risk can look, how it can present itself, but really key to all of this, how that can present itself in young people, because we are at times dealing with young people who are in that grooming process, so they may not present in the way that we typically would expect them to present. So hopefully today I'll give you some really good ideas, hints and tips in terms of the thought of thing that you're looking for. But what we're really keen is that the practitioners build this into their existing practice. This is just another string to your bow, as it were, rather than seeing it as something entirely different that sits separate to all the other safeguarding or support work that you deliver, really.
Chris, some points that you raised that I really want to focus in on, and I think we need to acknowledge that the chair of the conference might have used the language harm away from the home and harm outside of the home, and I was thinking, oh, how have I missed that? What have I done there? And I think it is new words and it is a new language. Now, other authorities around Tees Valley use different things: risks outside the home, extra familial harm. And when I started this work, I was really interested at why Darlington had chose harm away from the home. And the more I've been thinking about it and the more I've talked about it, what I really like about your use of language for this is the focus on the harm. So risks outside the home, extra familial harm away from the home really focuses on the child's abuse and the suffering that children are enduring. And that's really where we need to focus in on, isn't it, in our safeguarding. And it's not about process, it's about taking those children, stopping them being hurt and healing the trauma that they've been through. So I actually really like, and I'm feeling and I'm hearing myself shift all the time about the suffering, the harm away from the home, the harm outside the home that the children are experiencing. And I think you're really right, Chris, around I hope people aren't expecting today like a sudden new bunch of tools and this is all going to be, because we're still very much in the early infancy, aren't we, on this big shift of how the child protection systems are moving on. But I think, you were right when we're shifting thinking. We're trying to help people see that, there is hope out there. This phenomenon, this pandemic that's going on with extrafamilial harm, sometimes you can feel quite hopeless and I'm not sure what can I possibly do against these exploiters, but there is so much that we can do.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I think I mean, we've reflected on what's happening regionally and nationally, and I know some areas have decided really to see this approach and this type of work as sitting very separate. I think we're really clear that it doesn't. That actually, for me, any young person could become at risk of this. So we have a typical view of what that may or may not look like. We generally recognise that there's an element of trauma already being suffered by the young person that makes them more vulnerable to these types of risks. But for me, the harm away from home, so to look at it very simply, children can suffer harm away from home and not be suffering any harm within the home. But similarly, they can suffer harm away from home and also be suffering harm within the home. And I think by trying to make it separate to everything else, there's the potential that you miss that. So it's about that being curious, that really exploring things and recognizing that, you know, we all know our young people come in all different shapes and sizes. And the last thing that I want to do as we're on this journey is sort of pigeonhole that it's only certain young people that are at risk, because it you know, it's not, it's everybody. So the harm away from home for me really captures that, because it's just an extra, you know, we think almost about the assessment triangle. This is just kind of making it a square really, but really every child we should at least be considering through this lens. So we've at least got that in our consciousness, rather than looking for signs which then take us down the assessment route specifically for harm away from home. Because once we've gathered the information to indicate there's that risk, that we're almost too late. It needs to be, you know, further upstream and understanding from an early intervention perspective how we can, you know, how we can link in with missing, how we can link in with early signs of exploitation. But it, you know, it has to be we have to see it as a continuum, in the same way that we do for all aspects of things, that absolutely everyone has a role to play. This isn't about sitting with, you know, safeguarding assessment teams. It's not just sitting with designated safeguarding leads within school. You know, it is about everybody broadening the horizons, that, you know, these risks and as you call it, it is harm is really prevalent.
Yeah, absolutely. Really powerful. And what I really love, Chris, is it's such an embedded belief from you at your level. So we know that's just going to filter down into the workforce. That's really good. And just the last point before we move on, we need to go where the children are at. You said, you know, children are going to present when they're being groomed. We can't expect them disclosures. We can't expect them, because they are so caught up in the secrecy and the fear. So, you know, really being aware of pitfalls and barriers right from this early set, when we open up this curiosity, is really powerful. So, you know, I'm excited to go on this journey with you. So thank you so much, Chris.